it would not be a great look if I burned myself out building unBurnt.
Today's guest is Alison Campbell, the founder of unBurnt, a women-owned, SBA-certified business dedicated to preventing burnout by tackling the root causes of workplace stress. With nearly 20 years in finance and tech, including leadership roles at a 1IB Plus global company, Alison uses her experience and certification as a health wellness coach to redefine how we work and lead.
We're in a system where it is incredibly hard to rest, to recover. We normalize exhaustion. People close to you in your life are telling you, look, this is totally unsustainable. What I'm on a mission to do is really flip the entire conversation, helping folks understand the impact that chronic stress has.
Welcome to the Purpose Profit Shift, where real stories about bold shifts illuminate how we can create a new economy. I'm your host, Rachel Bernier-Green, social entrepreneur, activist, and founder of EJ Consortium, a finance consulting firm designed to help purposeful businesses change the world. Today's guest is someone who spent 20 years proving she could keep up with the relentless pace of corporate America, climbing through senior roles at Morgan Stanley, Wayfair, and WorkHuman. She mastered the art of driving growth at hyperspeed until the day her body forced her to stop. After a health scare landed her in the emergency room, Alison Campbell had to confront an uncomfortable truth. The same playbook that had launched her career was breaking her, and she wasn't alone. Now, as the founder and CEO of unBurnt, Alison is on a mission to rebuild how companies think about performance, proving that ambitious outcomes and human well-being aren't competing priorities. She's the person leaders call when they realize their work harder strategy is starting to cost them their best people. So in this conversation, we're going beyond the surface level wellness talk to explore the real systems that either protect or deplete the humans building mission-driven businesses. Because if we're serious about creating a new economy, we can't afford to burn out the people building it. Welcome to the Purpose Profit Shift, Alison.
Thank you so much. I'm thrilled to be here. I've been looking forward to this conversation and so excited to dive in.
Yes, and I have, as I was kind of researching and prepping for the episode, I realized that we had so much in common about our experiences. And also, I think that we'll probably find a lot of the audience has had a similar experience where they have allowed their career to kind of drive them to the brink of sacrificing their health. So I'd love to just start off by framing, taking us back to your life before the health scare. Kind of what did success look like for you at that time, and what were you willing to sacrifice to achieve it?
Yeah, thank you. I agree. I think there are, unfortunately, with the modern pace and the way that we really reward hustle and outcomes in our society, certainly my story is not unique, and some of your listeners may hear or see themselves in what I experienced. But you nailed it. I think, as an ambitious woman growing up in an era where we were told, you can do anything, you can have it all, you can be it all,
Yes.
work hard, and success is yours for the taking, right? I really internalized those messages, right? And so I hustled and worked my entire life, and I'm proud of that work ethic, right? I've taken great pride in investing in my growth personally, professionally, helping to lift others along the way.
Yeah.
But I also was willing to sacrifice my own well-being, and at times my sense of self to get there, right? Thinking, this is the cost, right? This is the price of entry, or this is a short period of time. I'm going to really buckle down and prove it, and I'm going to get that promotion, or I'm going to work really hard to deliver this outcome, this meeting, land this new client, and then I'll rest. But the problem is that I spent 20 years in that motion, right? Through corporate. And if I'm being really honest, had a lifetime before that where it was all about reaching that next milestone, working really hard to get into a great college, being at the top of my class through my college career, right? And so that pace can serve you, and you can kind of sustain it for a while, right? I mean, I certainly
Yes.
did my entire life until I had that health scare, and I can share more about that. But the challenge is that not only the unrelenting demands, the always on society that we find
Yeah.
ourselves in now, right? Constant notifications, 24-hour news
Oh my
cycle,
gosh.
right?
Mm-hmm.
There's macro stressors, there's workplace, and then there's the personal, like our family
Yeah.
obligations, our community. There's just always things going on, right? For me, I think the additional layer of pressure that really, really started to break down my ability to cope with the pace, right? And I also want to say it is absolutely not your fault. If you're listening to this and you feel
Right.
like, oh my gosh, I'm struggling, like, why can't I keep up? I just want to also caveat right now at the beginning of this episode that we're in a system where it is incredibly hard to rest, to recover,
Yes.
and to find a pace that is sustainable. So we'll talk much, much more about that. But I
Yes.
wanted to just go on record of saying, like, it's not I don't have all the right systems and I'm not resting well. It's sort of part of the paradigm we're in. But with that said, I personally had to take a really hard look at what I deem success, and
Mm-hmm.
the and quite frankly, this is a vulnerable share, but how I was seeking not only the next title, the next accolade, but that external validation, right?
Right.
And so when I thought about and had this health scare that I'll share, not only the way I was working, the system I was in, but a lot of that self-worth stuff that I was
Mm-hmm.
seeking from external sources, that sort of recipe of all of those pressures,
Yeah.
was the thing that really, unfortunately, led to my severe burnout.
And I love that one, that you took this back to the pre-corporate America, because we talk a lot about this with corporate America, but we don't always acknowledge that those of us these patterns and these systems don't start in the workforce. This was when I look back to like my behavior in high school and the amount of work I was carrying,
Mhm.
absolutely obscene. But like those patterns start early. And I love that you also pointed to that was, part of your sense of self, so that we are not talking about personal failings, that we're talking about systemic issues, and that it goes deeper into our psyches. It's not just I can do better. And also hitting on that very convincing, really lie that we tell ourselves this is temporary. It's just this one final push to get to this one
Yes.
final thing, but there's always going to be something else that's driving us. And if we're willing to continue to make those sacrifices, oftentimes we don't stop until something makes us stop.
Absolutely. And I think that we convince ourselves not only is it temporary, but that we will be able to slow down. We will be able
Mm,
to rest and really lean into those periods of recovery.
yes.
When, quite frankly, I'll speak for myself, I never really learned what that looked like
No.
and how to downshift and how to have restorative
Yes.
recovery as part of my overall sustainable ways of living, of working, of
Right.
being. And so it is, unfortunately, it's very insidious because we hit that
Hmm.
milestone, we get that promotion, and then we not only feel like, oh my gosh, now I have so much more to prove, but we
Right.
also don't quite know how to downshift. And so that's
No.
been a really important part of the work.
Yes, and we're definitely going to have to talk more about that, because I found that as leadership, and I've never had a leadership course that taught me to teach my team how to engage in restorative behavior. And so I've been kind of having to do a DIY when I notice that people are on the
Mm.
brink of burnout, figuring out how do we step in, how do we intervene, so that we can prevent this person from going down this path when no one has been taught how to restore themselves. That's an amazing point. So even with the best intentions, if we don't know how to do it, it's not as simple as just saying, I'll slow down, and then, magically we slow down.
No, unfortunately, it's not a light switch, right? We can't just
Not
turn
at
it on and
all.
off. And so, absolutely. And I love that you're DIYing it. That's incredible because we're not taught. We are just simply not taught.
Yes, and that's part of why I was looking forward to this conversation so much. And I know that some of my clients, I've been telling them, hey, I was like, I don't have the answer to this, but I'm going to talk to someone who I think might have some of the answers and that, I can point you to and you all could work together because we are recognizing the issue, but looking for the solutions. So kind of going back to your story, when did you first notice that something was off and kind of were there warning signs before you kind of hit a crisis point? I know for me, there were plenty of warning signs that I blew right past in
Yeah.
retrospect.
Yes, unfortunately, it's another very common thing. So, we normalize exhaustion and we
Right,
totally accept this is the pace. This is what I signed up for, right? This
right.
is what I'm working toward. And so, absolutely. Yeah, I think I was in a very high pressure, high pace role, a mother of two young
Yeah,
kids coming out of COVID, right? Coming out of that period of intense lockdown. I was back to travel, international travel, back to the office, and helping my children transition from
yeah,
homeschooling back to hybrid and then in-person learning. And there was just a lot of, I think, fear, anxiety, and
very much so.
stress, pressure that had been built up over COVID. I think that goes
Right.
without saying, and it was a pretty universal experience. But I sort of went right back in full force and didn't want to slow down.
Yeah.
I was absolutely feeling a difference. Not the I'm tired at the end of the week, not the Friday night I can't think about what we should have for dinner. I just want to order takeout. This was a much deeper exhaustion,
Yeah.
depletion. This was starting to feel pretty foggy. My
Mm.
memory was, and I have a very, very good memory. So this was a distinction for me where all of a sudden I was, forgetting things that were discussed in meetings, not the whole
Mm-hmm.
meeting, but I was kind of like, oh, that's right. We did cover that, those moments,
Yeah.
those experiences. But the biggest warning sign and the one that I ignored the longest was stomach aches. I
Mm.
was walking around feeling, pressure, stress, and I honestly think I was kind of holding it all. Like I was holding my breath
Yes.
through really tense meetings and would leave with stomach aches thinking, "Oh, I must have ate something that didn't agree with me," or,
Mm-hmm.
"Ooh, that was really tense. Yes, I must really hold all my tension in my stomach." Again, totally normalizing that I'll not
Right.
only this is normal, I'm fine, but yeah, I'll take a couple days off after the next board meeting. I'll slow down after this next big project.
Mm-hmm.
Never did. And unfortunately, the stomach pain started intensifying until I ended up in the emergency room. I actually had flown home from an international trip, was feeling pretty unwell on that Saturday. And then by Sunday, I said, you know what, this is actually, you hit that point where you're like, this is not okay.
Yeah.
Instinctually, I know something's really off. And so I went to the emergency room and I was told I had to have surgery. And so it wasn't even that I was unwell. And even if my experience was pain that didn't lead to a surgery, still
Yeah.
would have been very, very scary to have gotten to that point.
Right.
But it was this kind of full circle moment of, oh my gosh, how did I get here? Lots of
Mm-hmm.
disappointment and shame around, I can't believe I
Yeah.
let it get to this point and that I didn't listen to my body.
Yeah.
Again, a lot of that internal struggle of blaming ourselves. And I also had this moment of clarity when you are in that pace and other people outside looking in can see it and they can,
Right.
people close to you in your life are telling you, look, this is totally unsustainable. But as
Yeah.
an ambitious woman, as a leader, as a mother, doing my very best to prove that I can, but also be an example for other women who were coming up.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't want to listen, right? For so long,
Yeah.
it was kind of like, la la la, I'm fine. You don't need to tell me to slow down. But I had this moment of clarity of, oh my gosh, it really is relentless and totally unsustainable. And by the way, no one single human being can keep up with this pace for
Yeah.
years and years without breaks. And so, not breaks meaning leave your job, but like the way I'm
Right.
working is just totally unsustainable.
So, what went through your mind when you got to that point and realized that you couldn't just push through, that something had to give?
Yeah. So, was told I had to have surgery. It was the end of 2023. And so luckily I was able to get something scheduled, before the holidays and
Mm,
not have to wait, because sometimes you can't get right in. And
right.
so being able to have surgery, get the results back, all of that, I was very, very thankful that that was a pretty fast process. And
Yeah.
fortunately, I was okay, right? I was able to have surgery, be told it was benign, be able to recover. I was home for the holidays with my family, which was wonderful.
Yeah.
And I kind of almost did the thing of saying, like, okay, well, we're through that. And, now I can get back. And so I did go back to work in January, but it was absolutely in the back of my mind, like this really isn't what recovery is going to look like for me. And
Hmm.
so I was kind of back at work for a couple weeks and I realized, no, this isn't, I have to make a change because it's not going to
Yeah.
change by me doing the same things in the
Right.
same environment. And so again, it was that moment of clarity. Listen to your instinct. This is not, and I want to say it was a very difficult decision because there was a
Right.
lot of identity wrapped up in me choosing to
Yes.
walk away from this leadership role, from a team I loved and from work I was
Yeah.
really bought in on. So it was not an easy cut and dry, I need to prioritize myself, I'm gone. I struggled
Yeah.
with it. But I knew instinctually that I had to make a change and that change couldn't be fuzzy. I'm going to look for a new job. I'll take a break when it had to, for me, unfortunately, I was able to do this. It had to be a very hard stop. I'm going to pause and prioritize my recovery.
Yeah. And sometimes those clean breaks are necessary because we, in many ways, and I don't use the word lightly, but are addicted to certain behaviors and to certain patterns. And when we stay in the same environment that has cultivated those behaviors and patterns, saying that we're just going to make a choice to do things differently in the same space is near impossible.
It is. It is. And I've talked to hundreds of people now over the last
Yeah.
couple of years where that experience again is pretty universal. The feeling
Yeah.
of I can't keep up, this feels unsustainable, but I feel like I'm broken. Wait a minute, I'm looking
Mm,
around, everyone else can do it. And feeling like making small incremental changes is almost impossible.
yeah.
It is possible. And so we can, of course, we will get there and we'll talk about it. But that feeling of really taking a hard look at the behaviors and the environment and
Right.
being brave enough to say, I love so much about this and this no longer serves me.
That is the hardest part, right? Yeah, holding the duality of those things. Because it's one thing if you didn't like, if you hated your work and you were ready to go, but when you're doing something that you absolutely love, and also going back to your point about identity, when your identity is wrapped up into not just the work that you're doing, but how you perform that work, you
Mhm.
know, it makes it a much more challenging decision because you have to go deep into really thinking about what your values are, who you want to be, what you want
Mhm.
your life to look like. And we often don't spend a lot of time, digging into the answers to those questions and really thinking about um, our values and is the life that we're currently living aligned with what we profess those values to be.
I mean, I couldn't have said it better myself. One of the questions I asked at that time was, how do I want to show up? Because I
Right.
really had this deep sense of, I don't want to say regret, but this sense of reckoning that I was
Hmm.
reacting to so many components of my life rather than proactively being present,
Yeah.
showing up in a way that I was proud of, right? So I actually now have a prompt on my phone every single morning. How do you want to show up today? Because it really
I
gets me in
love
a
that.
space of thinking about, okay, like what's on deck for today? How do I want to step into my day from a space of intention, of confidence, of purpose
Yes.
versus picking up the phone and just reacting to whatever I already signed up for. And
Yeah.
so I think asking those tough questions, and it doesn't have to be a very long exercise, but getting comfortable, really questioning, yes, what are my values? Why am I doing this work? How do
Hmm.
I want to flow through my days? Do I feel more energized or more depleted? And am I noticing a pattern in how I'm going through my weeks
Right.
and my months? And so I love that you talked about that, those sort of really deep inner questions that often we don't give ourselves the space to answer.
Yeah. And I also, when you just hit on, um, does this energize me? Does this drain me? Thinking about the activities with intention. And that's part of the reason, because honestly, I almost rescheduled our podcast today because I have a pretty tough day, like an emotionally laden day. And I knew that I needed to intentionally add in some activities that I knew were going to invigorate me and restore me. And having conversations like this is one of those activities. And so I said, I'm going to carve out time to make sure I do this for myself because I know that this is going to give me some buoyancy as I go through the rest of a pretty challenging day. And taking the time to think about how the different things on your calendar impact you so that you can be strategic moving forward and say, I need to have the right mix of activities. Obviously, sometimes there are things that I don't want to do, and those are going to be draining. But if I consistently find that I'm spending most of my day doing activities that are depleting me,
Mhm.
I know that I've strayed away from my values alignment, and I need to do a reset to get back to that point.
Absolutely. And I'm so glad we're having this conversation, that this is one of the energizers and the things that
Yes.
are filling your cup back up. I love that.
Yeah, because there's so many people struggling with the same thing. And so, like, being
Hmm.
able to have this conversation, and hopefully, some people will walk away, even if they just walk away knowing I am not alone. I am
Hmm.
not broken. This is a very common experience, and that there are pathways forward. So I think I'm really going to, enjoy shedding light on that for people, and especially, because in the startup world, because you now have your own business, and we'll get into that. And the startup world glorifies the grind, the hustle, and um, I always joke with my clients that one year a client gift is going to be like an anti-hustle culture, like sweatshirt or mug or something,
Yes.
because I'm always preaching that to people. And people who have known me for a while sometimes give me side eyes and they're like, "Who are you?" Because they're like, "You are the queen of grind it out, work hard, do all the things, don't stop." But that did, almost cost me my, well, it did cost me my wellness for a while, but like that pace could have cost me everything. And
Yes.
so when you are, and especially in this culture where we are really in some ways taught that rest is lazy,
Hmm.
and that taking time to prioritize ourselves is selfish. And so sometimes there's some, when you are stepping back from that, did you experience any guilt that you kind of had to navigate as you were making different choices?
Lots of guilt, lots of um, shame initially, as I mentioned, the why couldn't I
Mm-hmm.
keep up? This is what I
Right.
thought I always wanted. I was super proud of the path and a lot of the
Yeah.
mentorship I was doing with younger women and,
Yeah.
quite frankly, professionals I was so inspired by. And so there was a lot of guilt personally around taking some space and really, really having to get comfortable that it wasn't going to be a one and done, that
Yeah.
actually it was going to have to be a total reset. And as I got deeper in the research and deeper in terms of my own self-discovery, it became very clear that actually it's all about consistency and that I can personally, before we talk about unburnt or the work, I can work and be ambitious and have really,
Yes.
really big, audacious goals
Yes.
and have space for well-being. And quite frankly, what I'm on a mission to do is really flip the entire conversation from a workplace perspective, from a personal well-being perspective. It's actually not how do we jam in some time for rest and how do we become okay saying it's not lazy, it's
Right.
actually needed. What I'm really after here is helping folks understand the impact that chronic stress has on
Yes.
personally ourselves, our well-being, our health, our capacity to think, to
Mm-hmm.
create, to remember things. That was my
Yes,
experience. You are not at your best when you are chronically
you are
stressed
not.
out and completely maxed. For me, the work personally started with this is not about sprinkling in some time off and changing the notifications on my phone, and then I'm going to go back to how I was doing it. This is a
Right.
total reset. And from a global unburnt perspective, that's the thesis, right? That's the ecosystem that I'm trying to build. It's actually we're not performing at our best. And from a team,
Yes.
leadership, company standpoint, you will deliver better outcomes when your people are well, right? And so that sounds
Yes.
very lofty. There's a ton of science, ton of research, and lots of practical application in terms of what that looks like. But that's the narrative shift that we need to be having as a society.
Yes, I love that you pointed on that because this is right up my alley. I actually, I think it was 2 years ago, for my holiday gift to my team, I got them all copies of the book Laziness Does Not Exist, by Devin
Mm,
Price,
I
where
haven't read that one.
oh, fantastic read. And they break down the science in
Mm,
the book about how our performance is actually inhibited and
mhm.
limited by these behaviors that we have, lauded ourselves for engaging in. And I know that there are so many. It's almost like deprogramming. There's so many
Yes.
narratives that you have to unlearn about what it means to be successful or valuable. And I really wanted my team to know that, like, when I'm saying this is not just like a woo woo thing. We actually will do better work when we are doing better. And that, that this is not a either or, this is not a trade off. It's a we take better care of ourselves and then the business outcomes are better. So there's really no reason for us to lean into these behaviors that don't serve us well, because they're not helping on any level. We've just been conditioned to believe that they are, that this is the norm and what we should strive for.
Yes. Oh my gosh, you're embodying everything as a leader, as a business owner. And I'm so, my heart is so happy to hear that because I mean, the counterintuitive truth is this. When we think we're looking at our list and we've got all of these responsibilities and we're like, well, I can't possibly stop. What rest? What is
Right.
rest? And
Uh,
you think, I don't have time. I have to
yeah.
keep going. I have to push through. I have to force myself. Think back to times when you were truly struggling, right? That the fatigue was setting in and you were forcing it anyway. It's not high quality work. It's probably
Yeah.
taking you significantly longer.
Right.
And, then there's a little bit of almost resentment that starts to build up, right? So even work you
Mm-hmm.
love becomes so much more taxing. And at the
Yes.
end of the day, I want to be really clear. I understand that we can't just clear our calendars whenever we want. This is not
Oh, if
about
only.
working less. This is about working smarter, right? And it's really important that we're taking those consistent proactive measures from a workplace perspective and from a personal perspective so that it doesn't get to crisis. We don't have to
Right.
clear our calendar because it's an emergency. It is baked in. It's how we work. It's how we live and we're going to perform better. We're going to be more creative. We're going to feel more connected to our
Yes.
teams and the outcomes will be stronger. So yes, I feel like we hit that point really hard, but it's such an important one.
It really is. So, for you, what were kind of the first practical changes that you made? You got to the space, you knew you needed to do things differently. Where did you start?
Well, I started first with research. So I was doing a lot of that self-reflection, lots of big questions. It was very
Yeah,
uncomfortable. It was very uncomfortable
it really is.
to sit with that blank piece of paper. I'll just nerd out for a minute and say I pulled out some old assessments. Like I was looking at, Myers-Briggs and various personality assessments and team, assessments that I had taken along the way. And I was like, okay, who am I? Started from
I
a
love
place
that.
of like, what am I after here? Like, of course, there was the immediate, I've got to recover, I've got to rest. To the points we made earlier, it took a couple of months, I'm going to say, to
Yeah.
really unwind that feeling of, I got to pick up my phone, I have to check, where am I supposed to be? That pull that
Mm-hmm.
I had to really sit with to unwind those behaviors, but also that feeling of intensity. And so the immediate sort of step 0 was get back to well, right? Like get to a
Yeah.
baseline where I'm less stressed, I'm recovering physically from surgery, and I was doing a lot of research around nutrition, right? So for me,
Yeah.
having gone through an issue related to my stomach, I wanted to sort of like do the research and get back to a healthier baseline there.
Yeah.
But then I was thinking a lot about, as I mentioned, that self-discovery piece. Like, what is it? Because it's not going back to what it was. And I
Right.
want to work. I have ambitious goals for my life. So it was to your point, not an either or proposition. This was, what is it going to look like though in the after? And so lots of research, tons of self-discovery, sitting with those uncomfortable big questions, and beginning to formulate little practices for myself as I was becoming
Okay.
more clear on, okay, I'm starting to feel that stress rising. And I don't even have work as a dimension right now that's adding to that. So based on what I'm reading, what I know, like I gotta tame it. So much of this is about awareness. And so again, I started just cultivating little practices, becoming much more in tune with naming my stressors, whether it
Mm-hmm.
was writing them down, saying them out loud, getting my arms around, okay, I'm feeling this feeling of nervousness and I don't even know why, like what's going on.
Yeah.
Brought a lot of clarity, of course, in the moment, but also helped me frame some of the bigger directional questions and then get to answers because I was able
Yeah.
to better articulate like what I was nervous about, right?
Right.
Clearly, as a listener, probably playing this out, yeah, she's nervous about what the next step looks like, but being able to really be clear and have these practices to catch those feelings, stop the spin. It stopped the
Yes.
stress from becoming chronic. And so those were kind of the first steps of like physically get well, research, and then starting to play around with some practices. What I just mentioned, I now call my stressor scan, but like really trying to figure out how I was going to walk the walk, right? So
Mm-hmm.
whatever came next, I wanted to be in a space of having better awareness, better emotional regulation, not always
Yeah.
reacting. And so that's really how it started.
So, at what point along this kind of discovery journey did you decide that this actually was going to be that you actually wanted to turn this into a business? This was going to be your next project and not just a personal transformation?
Yeah, such a great question. I was pretty sure I was going to go back to another corporate role, maybe a startup or, something kind of series A, series B.
Mm-hmm.
I live in the Boston area, so there's tons and tons of great companies, wonderful tech
Yeah.
scene. And so I started networking and just having conversations with people I respected and trying to pick my head back up and figure out what's going on and what types of roles were coming out. But I was also very vulnerable and very honest, sharing what had happened and where I was and where I wanted to go. And honestly, the light bulb moment happened after a series of conversations, networking, where every single person I met was reinforcing or seeing a portion of my story in them and saying like, oh
Mm.
my gosh, yes, oh, I'm struggling so much. Or my sister-in-law just went through something so scary. She was so stressed out
Right.
at work that she lost feeling in her arm. I mean, some really
Yeah.
scary, big stories were being shared. Personal things. People were coming to me as I was slowly starting to share a bit more about my personal journey.
Yeah.
I was hearing from so many other people, particularly women, just how much the past few years, pandemic through where we were at, had taken a toll, and how they just
Yeah.
felt like it was unrelenting, and how they
Mm-hmm.
didn't really know how they were going to continue at that pace, and yet they weren't quite sure, other than treading, what to do about it.
Yeah.
And so that was the moment of, oh my gosh, I'm certainly not special. This is such a universal experience. I'm so I was sad, I was frustrated, I was a little angry. I was like, there's so many
Yeah.
talented, really ambitious people who want to do good work, who
Mm-hmm.
are treading, who are unwell. There are employers and leaders who also want to create a culture
Right.
where people are well and we're performing and delivering results. So this was not there are malicious people walking around, companies are bad, corporate is bad. This was we've reached a point where the systems and the way we operate no longer is matching human capacity.
Right.
We've broken it. And a
Yeah.
lot of the challenge I was finding when I was sort of looking at employee well-being and from myself thinking about, okay, what kind of culture do I want to go back to? I felt like there was a major disconnect between employee well-being as this side little project off to the side, which was
Hmm.
completely disconnected from how teams, leaders, the company was operating. To
Right.
me, it was so clear after 20 years of being an operator that inherently so much of the solve here had to lie in ways of working, operational rhythms, some pretty, I'm saying words that sound pretty basic, but to me, it wasn't about, okay, do some wellness stuff and then get back to work. It was actually
Yes.
about fundamentally shifting how we're working.
Right.
So maybe not one light bulb moment, but I would say a series of lots of conversations and lots of ahas that led me to think there might be something here.
Yeah. I absolutely love that. And so as you kind of got into this and you decided to start unBurnt, what have been some of the results you've seen from some of the organizations that you are working with?
Yes. So I started from a space of lots of self-compassion and lots of, we're going to try this. This might be a little bit of an experiment. I was continuing to do lots and lots of research to help underpin the types of practices. So kind of bringing my
Hmm.
20 years of operating experience alongside research. And I got certified as a health and wellness coach. So to really bring this holistic
Yeah.
package together. But I was also I went in eyes wide open that this might not work, right? And so let's see what companies are struggling with, what leaders are looking for in terms of a transformation, right? I don't want to sort of be somebody that's talking about burnout and dwelling on the negative. I actually am really interested in helping to support teams so that there's a positive transformation. How can I measure that? What are people willing to
Yeah.
pay for? Right. So I went into this with a very sort of testing lens around, let's see if this will work. But I had a clear point of view on how I wanted to address it. And so some of the transformations have been really interesting, very inspiring, super rewarding to watch unfold. Um, Everything I do, I measure. So you mentioned earlier Morgan Stanley. I was originally a finance major, analytics, data, again, research, very much at the core,
And
unburnt.
that's
And
how I knew we were kindred spirits.
yes, very much in the DNA. And so, I've been very intentional about wanting to really help companies understand not only how they can measure and map short-term outcomes
Yes.
related to the programming and the work that we're investing in together, but how they actually map to longer-term business outcomes, right? So some
Yes.
of the things we're looking at, of course, we're looking at burnout risk. So we really want to understand, what are some of the top risks and early warning signs? And can we
Hmm.
measure a transformation to understand if we're doing something to help folks get capacity back and lessen that
Yes.
risk? Capacity is a score that I measure. And so there's a number of dimensions that I'm looking for
Okay.
to understand through the programming. Are the leaders going through the cohort? Are the employees that are participating in another type of programming experiencing more capacity after the engagement than they were before the engagement? And so capacity, and it sounds, again, it's like a word, but one of the biggest things I'm helping teams understand is, again, it's not that either or proposition. This is
Right.
not, let's jam in half day Fridays and take a day, half day off. It's actually about sustainable ways of working that allow you to get, of course, some time back, but the
Right.
capacity to innovate, to collaborate in more effective ways, to drive to the outcomes cohesively, right? Does everyone understand the goals and how we're getting there? And so the capacity measure for me and the dimensions I measure is a really important indicator because it is back to the points we were talking about earlier, helping companies understand that when there is that time, space, capacity to perform,
Hmm.
we're showing up at our best, we're collaborating more effectively, and we're delivering those
Yep.
outcomes. So there's kind of that through line that I'm able to show. And so I can talk about many more data points, but I know that's not why we're here, but it's been very rewarding to see teams embody the work, go through the practices, and then actually apply them so that
Yes.
the work is flowing better, people are feeling sort of more holistically well, if you will, and it's been incredibly inspiring to watch.
Well, I love the mini dive into the data because I use data points with my team. So, for example, I have used our project management tool. It has a chart that tracks when people are behind on task. And I have actually shown my team you can track my mental health and well-being by how well I'm doing on keeping up with my task load. So, like at this
So
point, I
interesting.
noticed I was in a depressive episode, and often my project management tool will recognize that I'm in that episode before I am. And
Wow.
then instead of using this as a punitive tool to say, oh, people are behind on their work, we use this as an assessment tool to say if someone was previously a high performer and all of a sudden they're struggling, we've identified that there's a problem, and what we are doing at that point is figuring out what kind of support do we need to offer so that we can get that person and help them restore their performance, which for me feels very intuitive. But my team was just like, the tool is saying yes. There's a direct correlation between my mental health, my well-being, how well I'm taking care of myself, and how well I show up in work.
And what a wonderful reframe that you're able to then use that to focus on surrounding a team member and support, recognizing in yourself, hey, okay, this is an early indicator here. I need to
Yeah,
throttle back so that you can get back to a place of performance because I know that you have very ambitious goals, right? So
right.
being able to catch it and then give yourself that space, incredibly powerful. So I love
Yes,
that
before
example.
you get to a space where everything has fallen apart.
Yes.
Now, I know that you're building a business and we've talked about, your ambitious goals. So now that you're building a new company, which is a Herculean task in and of itself,
Mm.
how do you protect yourself from recreating the same patterns you experienced before? And kind of what systems do you put in place to try to provide some guardrails?
I say very often that it would not be a great look if I burned myself out building unburnt. So that's my joke with myself anytime I'm starting to feel like enormous amounts of pressure. And look, I have very big aspirations for the company. And at the same time, I recognize that I don't have the resources that I used to have at a $1 billion plus
Right.
company. And so I've had to really get myself into a space of recalibration almost on a weekly basis
Yeah.
to sort of reconcile, okay, here's where I want to go. And then here are the resources, be it people, be it budget that I have right now. So I need to be really realistic and extremely focused because,
Hmm.
yes, there are probably 5 more things I want to be doing every single week. I can't. And
Yes.
so to be realistic as a founder, as an entrepreneur, and as a professional who is deeply committed to building this work without burning out,
Yeah.
there are trade-offs, there are systems I've built so that I have a very clear perspective, lots of focus on what I'm working on and why.
Hmm.
As I mentioned, measurement so that I'm looking at outcomes and I'm able to, for myself, and also to be able to articulate the progress clear on how what I'm working on is mapping to results.
Hmm.
And then there's a very long backlog of things that I'd love to be working on, but I'm just not quite there yet. And that's been part of the most uncomfortable uh, reconciliation of, oh my
Yeah.
gosh, I so wish I was moving faster on that, or I could start that. And I know it's only January, we're in 2026, January 2026, and I know there are a couple of things on my backlog that I won't even get to this year. And
Yeah.
that's just the reality of being an early stage founder and company. So that's the first piece. The second piece is truly embodying the practices that I had originally created for myself, many of which I've evolved and have become part of programming or parts of the unBurnt ethos. I really give myself space to check in from a personal awareness standpoint. I have a couple of wellness practices that are non-negotiable. So I tell clients all the time, you have to build in space, not only for restorative rest, but proactive well-being. Schedule it and honor it in the same way you would a business meeting or a family obligation. Non-negotiable. I have really fallen back into running, falling in love with running all over again. I did my first ever half marathon last year.
Oh,
and
congrats.
Thank you so much. And it really, for me, is a form of therapy. I love running. I love listening to my music and just getting away from all screens and sort of out of my head and just having that be sacred time. And I truly honor, again, that commitment as I would a meeting with another CEO, because I know that even if I'm a little tired or the pace isn't going to quite be there, I will feel so much better on the other side.
Right.
And it's a practice I enjoy and that keeps me well. And so that's a big part of the work. It's a little bit of that push and pull, right? It's easy after a lifetime of programming, as you said, to want to fall back into old habits of, oh my gosh, I got 3 more things. But I'm really very disciplined about, even when that counterintuitive truth starts to sneak back up, pulling myself back.
Yes.
Last piece, actually, let me just be very clear. I think I'm a lot more self-compassionate if and when weeks go off track, because they inevitably will. Things come up. People get sick. I'm a little sick right now. I'm so glad I didn't cancel this, but life happens. And so
It does.
We cannot be so rigid to think, I got 10 things on my list, I'm going to check all 10 off by the end of the week. I think, doing a better job personally, and it's been lots and lots of personal discovery, recognizing, where things fall off track or when they do, how to sort of course correct, and being okay with sometimes things not going according to plan.
Yeah, that is crucial, because if there is one thing that we can count on, is that life will life, that things will happen, we'll get off track, and that is okay, that is a normal part of the journey. And really leaning into, okay, how do I reset when that happens, serves you so much better than, just beating yourself up because you got off track for a little bit, or this thing didn't go to a plan, or you're a little bit further behind than you were. And one of the things that you've talked about is how chronic stress can impact our performance. And so sometimes I tell my team that we are, being counterproductive if we put too much on our plate and then we beat ourselves up for not doing that, because sometimes, one, our best looks different in different circumstances. When you are handling a lot of additional stressors, whether that's something going on in family life or what have you, like, your capacity is different and you're still doing your best, but your best might not look like it does at your peak, and that's okay. And so we need to then adjust our expectations for what, in this period, what we're capable of. But also remember that even when we are doing our best or trying and we get off track, that we can always start again.
Yes, absolutely. I love that.
And also preaching to myself, because no matter how long you've been on this journey, I think that that's one thing that we have to remember, that we're, deconditioning ourselves from 30, 40 plus years of programming. It doesn't happen overnight.
Absolutely. And I think continuing to come back to that self-identity. So it's not to say that the systems and the world we live in does not still glorify hustle culture.
Yeah.
But when you're looking to your left, looking to your right, and you're feeling like, oh my gosh, I'm not keeping up, there's that element of FOMO, but there's also that element of, again, seeking the external validation or trying to match somebody else's pace. And it's an incredibly freeing, but also very positive for me to kind of switch back into run your own race. And
Yes.
yes, of course, I want to be out in the world and cheering other people on and aware of what's happening, but I'm not comparing myself to how
Yes.
quickly I'm building unburnt or whatever the milestone is within the business, how quickly I'm getting there.
Yeah.
One thing that's been really helpful actually is kind of flipping back to I'm a unique individual building a unique business. There are
Right.
certainly business playbooks and best practices to look at, but no one's building or has ever built what I'm setting out to do. And so
Exactly.
there's no pace to look at because I'm determining what that is. It's been just a helpful mental exercise.
I love that. So, one thing I've been wondering about is just founder to founder, what has been the hardest part of building this business? Because you did have the corporate background, you did have the finance background, and so that's already given you a stronger foundation than most entrepreneurs have. But I know that it's always a challenge when you're building a new business.
Is I touched on a little bit that recalibration and having to get comfortable moving at a different pace than corporate when you
Mm-hmm.
have a team and resources and budget behind you.
Yeah.
I'm so energized by the work. So I think I think for me, I'll just be really honest. One of the things I miss most and has been the hardest is building this. I'm a solo founder. I have a couple of team members now. We all work remotely. And so there is an element of really missing leadership, mentorship, collaboration, and some of that
Mm-hmm.
connection that happens. And when you're in an
Yeah.
early stage business, a lot of it is, all right, heads down, prove it out, get to product market fit. And so I don't want to necessarily distract myself or carve out budget to grow a team because I'm missing that element. I want to stay ruthlessly focused on kind of proving out this stage, but I really
Yeah.
miss working with people on a more ongoing basis. That said, I have found a whole new peer set, founders like yourself, and I get so much joy out of collaborating, albeit in a different way, and helping to
Yeah.
support other businesses and other founders on their journey. And so I feel like I've built a little collective of other
Yes.
founders, maybe similar, maybe some are at different stages, who it does feel like I have a little tribe of other people who are, I'm not going it alone. There's other people out there trying to forge this new path. So,
Yeah.
yeah, I think getting comfortable with the pace I'm going as a solo founder and then, missing that daily interaction.
Yeah, I definitely can relate to that and having to build different support systems. So both in we're both part of the OGC community, the Old Girls
Yes.
Club. I'm a part of a virtual co-working community where I work with some of the same people virtually every day just to get some of that camaraderie. But we do have to be intentional about,
Mhm.
how we're allocating dollars, and also, to your point, when you're in the early stages, those first couple of years, that you have to remember that every yes has an opportunity cost. And so when we say, okay, well, I'm missing this, so I'm going to do X, Y, or Z, what are we trading off to do that? Um, and yeah, can be challenging to keep that focus.
Yes. One of the big shifts for 2026 in terms of the connection and meeting other people, and I get so much energy just out of having conversations, comparing,
Yeah.
talking about like what we're seeing, trends. One of the big shifts for 2026 is going to be to get out of my house more. And even though I have the ability to work from home, other than in-person
Hmm.
client meetings, I think really challenging myself to get out, get into the city more, to join as many networking events as I can.
Hmm.
It's that extra push sometimes because it feels
Yeah.
like, oh, I'm saving time, I can get more done, but that's sort of old habit behavior. So as
Hmm.
I've gotten unburnt off the ground and I'm in a little bit more of a predictable rhythm, that's a goal for 2026.
Love that. And so for entrepreneurs and leaders, who are listening to this and they recognize themselves in really both of our before stories, what would you tell them is the first step, when someone knows they're burnt out, can't imagine slowing down, but they know something has to give?
That's a big question. Okay, so I think, the first step is really, as to the extent possible, with a busy, full life, max calendar. You mentioned it feels impossible to slow down. It's finding space, and I would challenge, any listener that's seeing themselves in the before story to look out in the next week. Where is a space where they can carve out quiet internal reflection time, 30
Mhm.
minutes? Does not have to be, you don't have to burn it all down. It can be 30 minutes on a Saturday morning. It can be a transition between work and home, right? Maybe you block a 30-minute meeting and that's your check-in with yourself,
Yeah.
but do it in the next week. Don't put it off. Don't say, I'll do it after Q1. I'll do it in the summer when I take PTO. Do it now. So look at your calendar and schedule that in and flow through some of the questions that we've touched on in this episode.
Yeah.
Think about what gives you energy. What are the types of activities, the type of work that you love and that really lights you up? And what are
Yes.
the things that drain you? One of the exercises I do with one-on-one clients, actually, after sort of a series of prompts and work, and there's some reflection exercises, but there's this very lightweight exercise of write your dream job. And that
Yes.
doesn't have to be figure out how to write a job description that you can go find on LinkedIn and apply to. This is actually, if you could cultivate your ideal scenario, what do your mornings look like? What is the type of work throughout the day? What types of big results or outcomes or milestones would you want to drive in a given year? And how are you showing up is one of the prompts. By sitting down and going through that exercise, very uncomfortable. Again, that white sheet of
Hmm.
paper feels very hard. And even myself, you can feel blocked, right? So I
Yeah.
did that before unBurnt, before I even knew that unBurnt was going to be a thing. I sat with like, okay, what's my dream job? What's my dream
Hmm.
day? What is my dream life? Not in the existential, oh my gosh, where am I going in life? But really just how do I want to experience my days? And so there was a lot in there that might be more than 30 minutes, but throughout the episode, we've talked about some questions and prompts. I would really challenge anyone that's hearing this to just sit down, 30 minutes, carve it out, and then just take stock. Start to
Yeah.
notice over the series of the next few weeks how you're feeling, check back in with that exercise. And then you can start to get some answers out of what's coming up.
Yes. And so I would love to segue that into finding out more about how, for people who are interested in doing more, how they can work with you. I know on your website, getunburnt.com, that you have a ton of free resources and downloadable guides and ways to learn about burnout prevention for individuals and organizations. But if people are listening and saying, this is great, but I know I need help, how can they best get in touch with you?
Yes. Yeah. So as you mentioned, tons of free resources on the website. Folks can reach out to me directly. So my email is allison@getunburnt.com. I'm Alison Campbell on LinkedIn. So you can find me there, DM me anytime. And generally, if you're just curious about the work or you want to chat about your experience, I'm always open to meeting new people. So feel free to reach out. Um, Check out the website as you mentioned. And yes, thank you so much. I really, really appreciate this forum, the conversation we've had. It's been so much fun. It's a heavy topic, right? So it's
Yeah,
interesting that I can say, wow, this was so much fun, but I get so much joy in hearing other people's experiences and then the
same.
transformation that you've been through and how you're leading your team from a place of purpose and intention. This has been just such a joy, hearing your story, your transformation. And so thank you so very much.
Oh, thank you so much for joining us. And for everyone listening, there's Allison, this quote when I was researching for the episode that you said that I haven't been able to stop thinking about that ambition doesn't have to burn you up to burn bright. And I just absolutely adore that because I think the most revolutionary thing that the people listening can do for their business isn't working harder, but working in a way they can actually maintain and modeling that for their team. That is a huge shift, and that's the future we're building of companies that actually serve everyone who works in the company well as the external stakeholders. So for People listening, if this conversation resonated with you, we'd love for you to subscribe to the Purpose Profit Shift wherever you listen to podcasts. We've got episodes dropping regularly with more visionary founders like Alison and change makers who are really reshaping how business gets done. And if you found value in today's episode, leave us a rating and a review. It will help other values-driven leaders find us. Until next time, keep leading with intention, scaling responsibly, and building businesses that matter. And remember, your well-being isn't a luxury, it's a prereq for the long game. I'm Rachel Brunier Green, and this is the Purpose Profit Shift.